This is Sporting Life.
Welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. David Orr, John White, Ed Chamberlain, Billy Nash, Graham Cunningham and David Johnson. A few breaking news stories to kick us off. And Ed, the BHA have got a new chairman. We've been waiting a little while. It's finally landed. A peer of the realm, Lord of the Realm, which is no surprise, a Labour peer, and a man with a strong industry background, not racing industry, but he's worked for big businesses. He was part of the Manchester Commonwealth Games, London 2012. Of course, 67-year-old. What was your first reaction when you saw the news?
That I know absolutely nothing about him, if I'm brutally honest. And this was breaking news when we recorded this on, what day is it today? Wednesday morning.
Wednesday.
I mean, good luck to him. I've read plenty about him since. This is good news in terms of government relations. In terms of tough jobs in racing, I think a clerk of the course or the chief executive of BHA is about as hard and as difficult it gets, but the chairman wouldn't be far behind. Likewise, the jobs are available at the Jockey Club with the chief executive there, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. Listen, I wish him luck. I hope he can open some doors for us in government. I do think Joe Somers-Smith, it's a shame he couldn't continue for longer, and poor guy with his health and so on and so forth, but he's exactly the right person you need in that position for me, and he works far harder than the brief in that job should be for the chairman. And my one wish with the jobs that haven't been taken yet, and I can speak about this because I came from outside of racing. Racing is such a unique and complex and bizarre sport as well. Racing knowledge is so important, Audie, and it just does worry me. And I hope those positions are filled with people who understand the intricacies of our sport. I think it's really, really important. I'm 7.5 years in. I still find it really difficult. I really do. There's nothing like racing. It is so hard. And bringing it to that audience that we do is so difficult and so challenging. Hopefully the upside to me is that I can bring it to that sports audience. And I hope the upside to this guy is that he can bring it with those Labour links to the current government. But I wish him luck. I mean, what a tough gig that is.
They'll be queuing around the block, and GC, they don't seem to be queuing around the block either for the chief executive role at the BHA.
You knew something there, GC.
Or the Jockey Club. Bill Barber, great piece in today's Racing Post. Good friend of mine, Bill, worked with him at CFAX years ago. Kids ask your dad. But from what Bill's saying, GC, it's not like there's cabs off the rank queuing up to step in.
Absolutely not. Morning all. Speaking of job switches, Ed, I've heard these match of the day rumours. If you go, just take us with you. That's all we ask.
I won't miss the part. I won't miss. That sounds wrong. I won't miss out on doing the pod on a Wednesday. It's getting perfectly with a schedule for a Saturday evening.
Good stuff. That's nice to hear.
Sounds like a podcast exclusive there, GC.
That is an exclusive. We're running that.
A quick line on the Baron, as we call him, Lord Charles Allen. My only question initially would be, 67-year-old guy with a big CV, Racing Post report, his current roles include serving as chairman of Global, the largest commercial radio group in Europe, founded by Ashley Tabor-King, son of leading Honor Michael. He's also chairman of international infrastructure group Balfour Beatty. That's a big deal. And e-commerce retail company THG PLC. And he serves as advisory chairman at global investment bank Moelis and Company. Now, I ask you this, at 67, with all those roles ongoing, it seems, how much bloody time can you devote to this role? It's advisory, as Ed hinted at, it's opening doors, it's ceremonial in some ways. But really, how much of an impact can anyone be expected to make if they've already got so much on their plate? The Jockey Club American connection looks to have been severed. It seemed very well advanced, as flagged up on the Sporting Life podcast. That's now a dead duck, it seems. So I don't know who will get that. But the biggest appointment of all, I think, in terms of important, is the replacement for Julie Harrington. And it's been tough for her and for Joe Somers-Smith. But if you ask them to put their major achievements on the table for the last several years, we're looking at Premier Racing, we're looking at a few deals signed among industry groups, and we're looking at some very significant existing problems which still exist. So good luck to whoever takes these new roles. I don't envy them.
And I sat next to Joe Somers-Smith once, GC, and he was talking about the days he's meant to do and what he's effectively contracted to do. Oh my God. I mean, he just, it engulfs you, and he does way more than that. So how this fella's going to find time for that with all those other roles, I've no idea.
It's the game to be in the chairmanship, isn't it? If there's that many, you can have that many goes at it. It sounds like a lucrative gig.
No, match the day on Saturday's easier, honestly.
Oh, yeah, well, honestly, best of luck with that. It's great news that you've landed it. It's tremendous, really exciting.
There'll be some racing people delighted just to confirm this is not true before people dancing in the streets.
There's got to be a chance Gabby Orriff is going to pip him to it.
Logan.
Gabby Logan now, isn't it? Yeah.
They're going to rotate it, DJ. They're going to rotate it.
Are they?
I mean,
another exclusive. Are you on the rotation, Ed? That's the question. And are we coming with you if you are?
Sporting Life Sources.
No Ollie Bell at Cheltenham this weekend either. I wonder whether he's landed a gig. Anyway, we can't keep speculating about match of the day. Let's speculate instead, David, about the BetMGM Fighting Fifth Hurdle at Newcastle. And I was like, pleasantly surprised yesterday when the email landed from Weatherby's Operations with the initial entry and 18 in there. I mean, I was fearing the worst when Paul, not so sleepy, retired, that we could be heading in walkover territory for the domestic 2-mile hurdles this year. But Constitution Hill, it seems like there's a fair few prepared to have a go against him this time.
Well, certainly at this stage, I mean, obviously these are just entries, aren't they? They're not declarations, and it's not for another couple of weeks until we know what he's likely to take him on. So, yeah, I think at this stage, they'll be plenty keen to keep their hat in the ring at the moment. And whether, if he does turn up and the vibes continue to be positive like they have been, whether there'll be quite so many still keen to have a go by the end of the month, I'd be a little bit surprised. But yeah, I'd not at all surprised that Connections are keeping their options open at this stage, because if he isn't there, you mentioned that lack of depth, there's going to be a nice prize to be won by a kind of horse that you wouldn't normally associate at that Group 1 level.
The most interesting entry was Mystical Power for Willie Mullins and JP McManus. I think JP and Frank Berry might do the entries themselves. It might be a race that they've targeted from Martinstown rather than Close Sutton. But at least that's Brighter Days Head as well in there. There is interest from Ireland at this stage as well, which is the one thing we were desperate for, to try to reinvigorate it over here this season.
There's definitely interest, but as Jono said, we're a couple of weeks away, and there are other races over here between now and then. So how many will actually turn up is a different matter. Brighter Days Ahead, I couldn't see her going there. I think maybe the Hatton's Grace would be more likely for her. Mystical Power is a possibility, definitely, as you said, being a JP horse. He's in the Morgiana and the Hatton's Grace over here, but obviously Willie will have plenty other horses for those races. The other Irish ones, Nürburgring is possibly going chasing this weekend. Colonel Mustard will probably turn up and make up the numbers. So look, it's good that there are that many entries at the moment, but when you go down through them, it doesn't look like that many will probably turn up on the day. It's probably going to be a small field, but it would be good if Mystical Power went there. At least he'd give Constitution Hill some bit of a race anyway.
And don't forget, taking on a former champion who hasn't run since Boxing Day, worked appallingly in his racecourse workout at Kempton Park, made a noise, and has had a wind operation since we last saw him jump a hurdle in a race last Christmas. So you can understand people wanting to make the entry at least.
Langer Dan, one of them, JC. Dan Skelton was discussing the sort of Stayers hurdle campaign for him. I don't know, a few runs at 2 miles. Could he get back down towards a Cobble Cup mark? It'd be interesting if they threw him in there anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, what a story. But no, the main thing is, I think this weekend hopefully kicks off pretty much 4.5 to 5 months of what ought to be terrific, compelling jumping action, because the last couple of weeks with the ground and the small fields and the Chelmsford and the walkover, etc., it's been a rum spell, hasn't it?
And I hope that's a sign, Audie, with those entries. It's interesting. I had long chats with Skelton and Paul Nicholls last weekend. The West Country weekend was great fun. I went to Exeter on the Friday, and they're so up for it. They totally get that. Do you remember that horrendous Bazball analogy I used a couple of weeks ago? But they get it. They get the need to put on a show. They get the fact we've all got to work in this together for the sake of the sport to put on really good competitive racing. Obviously, they're frustrated by the weather at the moment, but hopefully that might be a sign of us having the penny dropping in that regard. Those two are certainly bang up for that. And you can see Skelton taking opportunities in small fields left, right and centre.
Nobody wants Frost after this dry spell, but how did the Bryony Frost factor play out at Exeter last Friday?
It was from a TV point of view, and being there was fascinating, GC. The walkover, everyone up in arms. This is a disgrace. National Hand Racing's dreadful. Why are ITV showing this garbage? All this kind of stuff. Then the Halden Gold Cup was really good. And then you had Bryony. Now, I know Bryony divides opinion and wouldn't be wholly popular in the weighing room, and people won't get wound up by the way she does an interview. But my God, the public love her. I mean, being there, the people were waiting just for her. The poor other jockeys just get absolutely pied as they come out the weighing room. And then afterwards, everyone wanted to speak to Bryony. Her popularity with the public. I remember that day when she won at Sandown, Tingle Creek Day, whenever it was. I mean, the outpouring of love for her is extraordinary, really. The public love her. And it turned from all the keyboard lot going, this is a disgrace, to suddenly, oh, hold on, this is actually all right. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a really enjoyable day, despite the walkover.
Quick line about the walkover, Ed. I think it crept under a lot of radars that the name of the race was the ICL Conscious of Our Impact Novices Chase or whatever. Now, if you're talking about being conscious of your impact, the race planning, why was that race even meant to be on terrestrial telly in the first place without the two non-runners?
Well, I mean, you look what it might have been. I mean, look at those entries, what might have been. It's just so frustrating. I mean, that could have been a day when we saw, we looked at the entries, we were excited about the chance of seeing Shanna Bob, Hillcrest, some of the Nicky Henderson novice chasers, and then what can you do? The thing we've got to do, and I mentioned this on the show on Saturday, and lots of other people have as well, I heard Rishi talking about, we've got to stop talking about welfare and it being safe. The ground wasn't suitable for the Sue Gardner or the Dan Skelton horse. That ground at Exeter was perfectly safe.
I think our novice handicap chaser won at Aintree, didn't it, JC, for the tipper? I know the field put up, but the Rebecca Menzies horse, was that your podcast selection that won the novice handicap?
But I didn't back it because the horses I wanted to make the market didn't run. But hopefully, it's going to get cold next week and a little bit of rain this weekend. But hopefully, both in Ireland and in Britain from now on, it should be bombs away.
We won't be seeing Vauban, though, Billy, in action in Ireland or Britain. $2 million has parted company from the Gay Walthouse team to secure him. He's staying in Australia to be campaigning for a third Melbourne Cup. Willie didn't think it suited him at all down there. They've clearly seen something that they think they can work with.
Well, this is a win-win for everybody, or certainly for the Mullins camp, isn't it? I mean, we spoke about this last week and the fact that we thought it was a possibility that Vauban would stay in Australia. I didn't think he'd stay for this amount of money, to be honest. They've done really well here, Ardy. I don't know what they bought this horse for. He was a listed winner on the flat in France, so obviously they gave a significant chunk of change for him. But he's after winning 6 races for them, 3 Grade 1s over hurdles. He's won a big handicap, a Group 3 and a Group 2 on the flat. He's been placed in a Group 1 on the flat. He's earned the thick end of, and actually a little bit more than 800 grand for them. And now they've got £1 million, to leave him in Australia, essentially. It's a real result for the Mullins and Ritchie team. Whether he'll be able to recoup that sort of money down in Australia, it's very hard to imagine that he will, but it just goes to show, why so many horses do end up down there. If they're willing to pay £1 million for a 6-year-old gelding like Vauban, I mean, they must be a pretty significant market down there. So, yeah, they'll be delighted. I'm sure Vauban will be delighted as well, because otherwise he'd have been, trundling around the likes of Navan and Gordon Park on the trail to a stayer's hurdle. So I'm sure that a stint in Australia is much more preferable than that.
David, domestically, he was just in the absolute top class staying races. He was just found a little bit short, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a possibility that 2 miles in well-run races stretched him a little bit, I think. So, it'd be interesting to see what his programme ends up like, because you wouldn't be in... Well, the reason that Willie Mullins and Rich Ritchie were happy enough to let him go, I think, suggests... that they don't necessarily see a third Melbourne Cup as being a realistic option. So, yeah, it looks like he's well sold, as Billy was suggesting there.
About racing, GC, we keep talking about Kia and the team. Their spending spree at Tattersall's was the talk of the town. They're leading the race. Nicholas podcast exclusive for Freemason Lodge, so Michael Stoute's base. I mean, it's another big statement of intent.
It is. It really is. I mean, I don't know exactly what their plans are as regards the trainer, but that is the key appointment. If they do succeed in landing this, there are at least 2 other interested parties who've made bids, I believe. But if Jarabshian and co get that yard, then they can't just fill it with ammo races, lads, ammo horses, can they? It's going to have to be a more open door policy. But the key appointment there is the trainer, and there's absolutely no chance that someone like Beckett is going to move, given how well his operation is going under his own steam. So who would be the preferred option? Any ideas?
Question. A very good question. George Bowie? Is he on the right trajectory? He's trained for them, has he? I think he's got horses with them.
Yeah,
Don't know.
It'd be an interesting and quite lively betting market, wouldn't it? And then
definitely.
The next market would be, how long will they last there?
That's the pertinent question, yeah.
That an even more volatile market. David, GC touched on, it's very interesting that Wathenham have said they're not trying to buy Freemason Lodge, but they were said to be leading those. But they've got their own private trainer who they brought over and increasingly got sent horses towards the end of last season. If Wathenham are going to put somebody in here, as GC said, won't be training privately, but we'll get a good chunk of theirs. The current trainers who train for Wathenham and Ammo, numbers might be down in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a potential concern, wouldn't it? I think one of the key things that we've seen with the Wathenham purchases so far predominantly has been when they've been bought as horses in training, they have left them with the trainers that they were with. I think there's a couple of exceptions. Hamad El Jahani picked up Striking Viking, didn't he, from Kevin Ryan? But, I think we've seen a few the likes of Carl Burke have had that have changed ownership, but they've stayed in the yard. Richard Fahey as well. So, the Wathenham story is one that continues to develop, isn't it, and grow. And I think that's obviously something that we're going to see throughout 2025 and beyond.
You were looking after last week, DJ. You were doing the media rounds for the Timeform Awards, crowning the champions, and City of Troy was Timeform Horse of the Year for 2024. Do you stand behind what was a very controversial decision?
Well, you joke, but it was quite close in the end because it was done by a vote of Timeform editorial members on a points-based system, and I think he only had a point to spare over Kyprios.
Yeah.
And I think. I don't know how many votes Billy had based on this. But,
I was actually away. I would have voted for Kyprios. I'd have tipped him over the edge, Jono. I was on holidays.
He's a false champion.
The one that got away, this is definitely. But look, there's not too much more that we can say about City of Troy that we haven't said several times. He was the best horse of the year, just about, I think. That doesn't necessarily mean he was necessarily deserving of quite all the plaudits that Aidan O'Brien gave to him. I think, he was one of the best, but he just didn't do enough on the track to justify some of the statements that were made on several occasions, I don't think.
I need to put in a slightly late rider on this. What if Sharon were to go to Japan this weekend with Ryan Moore replacing Sylvester de Souza? The Japanese Racing Association don't want Sylvester on the ground. Ryan Moore rides Sharon in the mile championship. If he were to bolt up in that, then that would add a significant feather to his cap.
It must have been close up.
Sharon, I think, was third place, yeah. And I always think Sharon is sort of like one of the great stories of the flat season in terms of look at the benefit of keeping these horses in training. He was 0 from 5 in Group 1s last year, but with virtually every run this season, he's enhanced his reputation. And, think back to what price Champion Miler would have been after Royal Ascot. Yes, he was impressive in the Queen Anne, but we were pretty sure that those 3-year-olds were going to come through after the St. James's Palace and really dominate. And, well, obviously, we never saw Rosallion again, and Notable Speech fluffed his lines a couple of times, whereas Charin, okay, he didn't win every time, but he had valid excuses out in France, and he topped his season off in impressive fashion at Ascot on Champions Day.
And we love a smooth segue on this show. What do you all make of the fact that Roger Varian, Sharon's trainer, is going to be training some Godolphin horses next year? That's a nice little end of season boost for him, isn't it?
It's very interesting. Yeah, he had Bilardo for him, didn't he? They bought into that horse in training before, but yeah, it does seem like an interesting change of approach from Godolphin.
I did chuckle that doesn't he share a driveway with the yard that is it the yard that Ammo have bought? It's one of the yard, one of the groups that got rid of it.
Noisy neighbours.
Yeah. Billy, I had to go at you about your holidays last week, and look, it's cost Cyprius dear, your extensive breaks through the autumn period. But thanks for that update. David, let's talk about Chelmsford, not something that we regularly do on the podcast. GC, the incident last week where the tractor couldn't remove the starting stalls from the racecourse for the last race on the card, and it was so frightening, wasn't it, how quickly they had to pull up in that home straight. The actual flag and the distance that they had to stop. I've never seen anything quite like it.
No, I mean, everyone's had their opinion on this. Clearly, it could have been horrendous, horrific. But as with all these things, the court of public opinion goes straight into session, pronounces disgrace, but the members of the jury don't always ask the right questions or the key questions. And I think I haven't heard the answer to my key question anyway. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, other than that I don't think Trump was actually shot in the ear. That's the one conspiracy theory that's a hill I will die on. But the first quotes in the Racing Post piece were from Jane Chapel-Hyam, directly involved as the trainer of one runner called Salamanca, told the Racing Post, when they load horses up in the stalls, they turn the tractor off. And I believe when the horses jumped out, the tractor wouldn't go into gear. First question, why the bloody hell would you turn the tractor off? That's a risk, isn't it? That tractor should be running. And then later on the same day, the Sunday, the next Racing Post news piece quoted Jane Chapel-Hyam saying, the tractor used to pull the stalls off the course after start wouldn't go into gear, with no mention of the other angle. So I'm fascinated to know what the policy is. That tractor should be running. It should be running, all the time and ready to take it off. And just to fill in, I know the situation in Hong Kong, and I had a couple of notes on this. It's just that Hong Kong have way more resources, 2 race courses, they race twice a week. So we are not comparing like with like here, but this is what I understand the situation to be in Hong Kong. I think they do 2 things. They have a tractor running constantly to avoid it not starting. That's the key point. And we have a backup tractor to pull the tractor and the stalls, should that be necessary. They also have a proper race abandonment system with flashing lights around the track to warn jockeys of abandoned race well before they get near a problem. And that was put into place when Hugh Bowman took a nasty fall early on in a race on the round course last year. The sirens sounded, the lights flashed, the race was stopped well in advance. But tell me what you think, fellas. The most alarming thing was the tomflaggery, the flag wavers. They really did not manage to get very far round the bend in order to warn the oncoming.
It looked very amateur, didn't it? But fair play to them. They were brave. They were very brave. Audie, you're a horseman. You're the horseman on the panel here. Aren't horses amazing? They could have stopped long before. It wasn't actually even that close. They are remarkable animals. And they can slam the brakes on like you wouldn't believe. For me, I mean, one solution, GC, you've just answered my question is about solutions. One solution I've heard a few times about earpieces for jockeys. Now, GC, you work with an earpiece, which is quite hard to use when it's silent, let alone when you're in the middle of a race and you haven't had any noise in your earpiece for years. I can't see that working. I think a tractor running would be the simplest.
Yeah, it did look a bit bush league, didn't it? Was I wrong to think that it seemed a bit? I didn't care for the way Chelmsford.
Don't blame Cheltenham for that, GC. They get blamed for everything else.
In the statement published, seemed to be halfway trying to throw. Is it what do they call it?
Is it Race Tech, the stalls team?
Race Tech. They seem to be throwing Race Tech, if not under the tractor, then under the bus in a 50% way at least, didn't they? They were parking the blame somewhat in a different direction.
Flashing lights idea just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Just some warning system that's visible by furlong poles. It's very clear to a jockey. There's a flashing red light. This race is abandoned. Pull up as soon as you can. That protocol would work. I know there's expense involved, and the Great Game's not overflowing with money, but I'm sure
they race a lot, Dave. They race a lot
right,
there, and they, a very, very independent racetrack in many respects. So they have I'm sure they have the resources to do something along those lines.
Yeah, he'll come down to resource, won't it, unfortunately. Resource for Paul Nicholls. What I loved, Ed, that he's been saying that he wasn't out of form all along, that also was just needing the first run. He has 5 winners at Wincanton. He's silencing the doubters already. We've just entered November. He knew they were in form. There was no panic. But it was a good, fun afternoon at Wincanton. Highlighted Rubo as well, who was good and looks an exciting chase prospect.
It's always good at Wincanton, Audie. It's always good there. And GC's going to chuckle away because there's going to be some great Ginny's Destiny quotes to come over the next few days. Nichols is back to his bullish best. And I questioned the form of his yard at the start of the show. He was straight over telling me about his strike rate. I love his attitude. He's a winner. He's straight out of my former world. He could be a Premier League manager, that man. He'd just be brilliant. You can imagine his rants in the dressing room rather than weighing room afterwards about referees and so on and so forth. He's a winner. And yeah, it was unfortunate that his daughter tipped one horse on the day, which was the one in the novice chase. It was about the only winner he didn't have on the day, which was quite funny. And you can tease Meg about it as well, which makes it quite good fun. And Rubo, I mean, is good is probably the right word, isn't it? It's just such a bare cupboard. And his jumping was the difference. He was very, very slick over his hurdles, which was great in running. I actually like it when Mick Fitz comes in during a race, and his timing on that was perfect from the tracker cam alongside as Rubo out-jumped Brentford Hope again. Unfortunately, I was encouraging him to have a strong opinion, and then he said in the Badger Beer they'd gone off too fast. And our dancer never came back, but I'd never stop Fitzy having an opinion like that. I think in running, it's good to get a jockey's opinion like that. But yeah, Rubo's good. He'll jump a fence well, but will be a long way behind the Irish novice chasers, I fear, when they get going.
I think Rubo is... Sorry, I was just going to say he's one of those classic examples of how good Nichols is with the programme book. Yeah. He's identified that he was going to go chasing. That was always a longer-term plan. But rather than sit and mess about until mid-November, he's won, I think, was it 20-odd grand on the Kempton race, 40-odd grand here for his owners. There's 70 grand in the pot before even the others that he's going to take on in novice chases have come out of the stable. So I think full credit to him for getting and identifying those opportunities and the fields that he beat. You know, he should have got out the races without him as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, don't forget, I think he was given £6 to Brentford Hope as well, wasn't he? Who's a smart horse, rated similar or slightly higher. So he's going to be Kempton bound, isn't he? Wayward lad this Christmas, I think, that horse.
Yeah, at least one race before then, isn't it? It's the Nichols plan. Struck me, Billy, he's a bit like the Godfather as well, in that he's got the Dan Skelton, who was assistant, Harry Devon, the upwardly mobile Harry Devon was assistant. I thought the interview with the two of them was great on ITV after the Kingwell, the Rubo win, where Harry Devon talking about Brentford. But Elite Hurdle, sorry, I didn't know. I knew it wasn't the Kingwell. But it's clear the influence that Nichols is having on the game with the people who've worked for him.
Yeah, massively. And yeah, you just said it there, Harry Dermot and Dan Skelton, two of his better known pupils. It's similar to Henderson, I suppose. There's a lot of Henderson ex-assistants are now ploughing their trade, ploughing their furrow in the trade as well, and doing really well. So yeah, that's I suppose a testament to both of those trainers, how good they are, and they're able to pass on their knowledge, and they're helping all these younger trainers come through.
Gee, we need a line on one that didn't go quite as well for Paul Carlisle. On Monday, Khalif de Burley fell far out in the graduation chase. Up to that point, he'd been so slick with his fencing. It looked like being a really exciting start over the larger obstacles.
Is that for me?
Is that to
Sorry, that's for you, GC, yeah.
Yeah, if anything, he was a little too exuberant and keen to get on with it. And against a handful of useful, more experienced horses, in the end, he took off way too early, 4 out. He was coming down. When he hit the fence, he was on his way down, and it was a heavy fall. And I think he might have got a knock on the head from Nell's son, who was coming by. But Paul reports him A1. I do remember the cement-footed Ahoy Senor. I didn't fall, but he departed halfway up the straight on his chasing debut at Carlisle, and he's bounced back multiple times since. So he remains an exciting horse, but that was not what you want to go 350 miles north for.
Let's talk Nicky Henderson now. Not statues, GC. Still no sign of construction at Cheltenham, but it's been a mixed week for the great man. Ed, I wasn't working Sunday. I had a quick look at the artist formerly known as Twitter's on Nicky Henderson trending, so that can't be good. And it was down to Jericho de Repenay's chasing debut, late to the start, trying to saddle a lion. The great man said it was just like a complete mess from start to finish.
Yes, amazing, really. We were excited about handstands in the Rising Stars at Wincanton, the Nicholls horse at Carlisle, and this horse at Sandown were the three I was most excited about. And all three of them were unfortunate and hopefully all okay. This was a weird one, wasn't it? Because I was a little bit late tuning in for the race and there was no sign of the horse, which I'll probably ask Anthony McCoy about this weekend. As far as the drift was concerned, a little bit like I got a bit probably overexcited about the drift of that Stoute horse at Donny that day earlier, late summer. The drift wasn't that marked. I mean, the 2 to 9 was mentioned, but that would have been for pennies. He drifted probably effectively from 1 to 2 to whatever it was, 8 to 11 in the end. And that's pretty natural when you find a horse who's played up like him beforehand. I didn't think a whole lot of it. He jumped, was it the ditch, which he absolutely ballooned, and that was that. And fair play to Henderson. Poor old Henderson. He can't win, really. He tries to help. He comes out and I thought did a really good interview afterwards with Anthony, wasn't it? And fair play to him for doing that. And it was informative, and it was just one of those things that conspiracy theorists like JFK and Donald Trump get a bit carried away about. It was unfortunate, but thankfully he's okay as well.
Am I right in thinking there was no announcement over the PA at Sandown, though, that he was very, very late leaving the paddock, having been taken back to the saddling boxes? But it seemed to drag. I was watching on RTV, and it was Anthony Dunkley and Steve Jones were paddling away and filling with no idea where the horse was initially. And it took ages to get any information. And as far as I can see, there was no PA announcement that the odds-on favourite who's drifting like a barge here is being resaddled, and he'll be joining the rest of the runners at the start as soon as possible. But as far as I understand it, nobody at Sandown knew where the bloody thing was.
I didn't realise that, which is clearly not acceptable.
If I'm wrong on that, I apologise, but I haven't heard anything to the contrary.
I was wondering, is there a time limit as well on what time you can actually leave the paddock for a race? Well, they could have been there till 4:30 if they'd have finally got the saddle on the lion. It could have been dark by the time they ran the bumper. And David, news from Hendo as well. So Gino, entered in the fighting fifth, is going novice chasing. They've made that decision. He's joining Madgeborough, the two top 4-year-olds of last season. It's no wonder the 2-mile hurdling cupboard is as bare as it is it? This modern trend of the best novices, hurdlers and juvenile hurdlers going over fences much quicker than they did in the past.
Yeah, well, they still get a bit of an allowance, don't they, the 4-year-olds? It's not what it was 20, 25 years ago when the likes of Flagship Uberales were mopping up in the Arkles in an Arkle as a 5-year-old. But yeah, I think also as well, obviously, the ownership and trainer, the yard is a factor. Obviously, Constitution Hill for the same stable, State Man for the same owner. It looks a really good fit to send Sergino over fences with that 4-year-old allowance. So yeah, it's without after time, and it's no great surprise that that's the decision that they've reached.
He made 4-year-old Caliph de Burley. He made Caliph de Burley look very ordinary at Aintree, didn't he? Mm-hmm. But Caliph de Burley is also a 4-year-old. And the perils of sending a young horse chasing were shown when he went to Carlisle. So he should be a real good one, Sergino, shouldn't he?
It's great news for the novice chase division. It's just
points for the Arkle now, Audie. We should have snapped up the 10 to 1 earlier in the week.
Sergino
wins the Arkle, yeah.
Right, what if Ballyburn goes novice chasing? I mean, we nearly got the exclusive Sporting Life on Wednesday.
Yeah, what is the news?
No, all I can confirm there is still no decision as to whether Ballyburn.
Have you had any contact, any messages with Millie Mullins about Ballyburn?
Message about Ballyburn, no reply relating to Ballyburn, GC, is all you need to know. But to smiling faces, so it was a very pleasant message.
Emojis. If it's Millie Mullins, I don't want to, you don't want to any trade secrets, but is he an emoji guy?
He is an emoji guy.
So I might have the solution there, Audie. I might have the solution because Sporting Life's Ollie Bell, I believe, is seeing Ronnie Bartlett this week.
Well, that could be the exclusive, couldn't it? That could be the... I mean, goodness me. We will get it first. Will he send it in a video?
Send a message to our correspondent, see if he can do that for us.
I think he'd be in bed at the minute. But once the podcast is finished, I'll give him a ring. Billy, we need to talk about the appeal for the Ces winner. It takes place on Thursday. He was actually entered at Cheltenham on Friday. He hasn't been declared. Tony Martin's name back on the race card. This whole appeal seems to go down to whether he actually made contact with the final stripe.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, this one. You know, the rules, like them or loathe them, they seem to be fairly black and white. It looked to the naked eye that Jamie Powell did hit the horse 10 times, and it seemed to be an open and shut case. They clearly must think something different to say they've appealed it. Now, the sentences were fairly draconian, but I can't really see them getting anything turned around here, to be honest, Ardy, unless they have some new information that is not available in the public realm. I just don't see this appeal succeeding, to be honest.
Billy, I've refused to watch it back because I just find the whole thing depressing. But is there any chance that they can go in there and say that one of them was for safety purposes?
It didn't look like it at the time. No, I'm like you. I watched it once or twice on the day and I haven't seen it since. They might try that angle, but it didn't look to me like he was hanging or anything. So I just don't think. No, they must think they have a case. But from what I've seen, GC, I don't see it being turned around, to be honest.
It's time to talk Cheltenham. 3 great days at Presbyterian Park. The weather hasn't played ball. Small fields on Friday, but we have got John Bond in the Schlur. Matt Brocklebank wrote a piece earlier in the week about his...
Very good.
Oh yeah, an underappreciated horse. If you look at his record, the races he's run, that we don't quite give him the credit he deserves. This looks a good opening to him. He's got Edwardstone to be. That's for you, Ed. His mind's in match of the day already here.
Sorry.
It really is.
It'll be easier for you on their order. You can just look at Shearer and he'll know.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really good piece.
Shearer.
A really good piece that Matt wrote. I'm not necessarily sure it would apply to the ITV audience. I think John Bond would be very popular, in particular with his link with Sir Anthony, who's on the show on Saturday. So we'll look back on what he does on Friday. And yes, I know that the owners of Schlur, I do feel a bit sorry for them. This race has been, it's been a small field the last, 3, 4, 5, even longer, really. And it's small field again. I don't know why the Irish, we rely on you, Irish, Billy. I don't know why no one seems to come over for it. It's a bit similar to last year. It's him against Edwardstone and a couple of others. And John Bond, I think, found the right partner now with his jockey. In terms of positivity, I thought he was very, very good at the end of last season. He had that one blip, didn't he, which came at Cheltenham. And he'll certainly be appreciated because he's the star act on Friday, and I'm pretty sure he'll deliver. And the most interesting thing is always to watch him in combination with the jockey. This time, I think he gets on pretty well with Nico. And I think that solved a lot of the issues he had before.
Just taking you up on that point, Ed, about why the Irish aren't going, it's very simple. We had the Poplar Square at Naas last weekend, and you've got a very similar race at Navan this weekend. So there's just no need for them to travel for the Schlur because they've got too many opportunities over here.
If you look at the division as well, you think Sir Gino comes in, GC, to add some lustre to it, then you realise, he's actually trained by John Bond's trainer. So I'm sure Nicky will try to keep them apart. But we are in desperate need of good 2-mile chasers over on this side of the Irish Sea.
We are. We've got good handicappers, and a few of them were entered. A couple of twisters, Matata and Master Chewy, but they've got a handicap option on Sunday at Cheltenham and a very valuable race coming up, I think, at Lingfield in a couple of weeks' time, etc. So they've got other options. But I would never dream of telling Schlur what to do, Dave. But add Sparkling Juice to the name of that title, because no bugger knows what Schlur is, do they? Nobody knows what it is. So the race passes by with a small field and no value in terms of advertising. Now, I know, and I know you lads know, that it's created from a blend of the finest grape juices, and it's a deliciously refreshing fruit drink, which adds a little sparkle to every occasion. But most people at Cheltenham won't do that.
There must be a few bottles in the post after that. That was textbook.
And it's working, isn't it? If you're asking what it is, then that's what advertising's all about.
It's the double bluff.
Yeah.
Billy Crock Country, there's 9. Gordon runs Conflated, who's got some top-class form. Hasn't been the easiest to win with. Do you think this is a discipline that he could shine in?
Well, he'll have to jump better than he's been jumping regulation fences recently, Ardy. That would be the big question mark with him. He'll go there fit. He did run behind the real whacker in the Charlie Hall at Weatherby. He wasn't a particularly good effort from him, but he's that kind of horse that maybe takes a couple of runs to get him right. But look, he's had his issues down through the years. He's not the most straightforward. He's had steering problems as well as jumping issues. So the cross country, he wouldn't have been my first choice for the cross country race. Elliott was said during the week that Delta Work was going to run, but clearly they must have thought the ground isn't ideal for him, and the couple of other Irish horses that I was hoping to see in the race aren't declared either, so there's only 9 in it. Certainly Conflated is the class act, but I'd wait and see how he gets on in a cross-country discipline. Like I said, he wouldn't have been my number 1 choice for that sort of race.
Mr. Coffey dogging it up the Cheltenham Hill will be a fun sight in the cross-country, won't it?
This is a race I love to have a bet in, as you know, in every year. And this year, Audie, because I always love to take on the Elliott horses in a handicap, just having a spin with bigger targets down the line. This year, Slipway, who they've always thought he's with the Aldeniti connections. They've always thought he's a good horse at Paulings, and he won during Gold Cup week last year. And then when he was good enough to run in the Bet365 Gold Cup, he's a good stayer, this horse. If he takes to it, I'd rather back him at 14-1 than those 2 at the front of the market.
Well, because Conflated runs in this, there's only 2 others in the handicap. So you've Conflated on 12 stone. You've 2 on 10.5, and everything else is technically out of the handicap.
Slipway's only a couple out, isn't he?
Only a couple, yeah. 3 or 4 pounds. But yeah, it's like that makes Conflated's task even that bit more difficult. You know, he's got to give lots and lots of weight away here.
Move on to Saturday, David. The Paddy Power Gold Cup and the slimline Ginny's Destiny. I mean, unrecognisable to what he was 12 months ago. Won the Timeform Novices handicap chase on his ascent last season. Connection seem to think he's going to win this as well. Are you a believer?
Yeah, I am. You look at everything that you look for in a typical Paddy Power winner, and he brings sort of pretty much everything to the table, doesn't he? He's a sound jumping front runner. He's a second season chaser. He's got plenty of experience at Cheltenham. His handicap mark looks fine. You know, he's got form at Group 1 level. It doesn't look a strong Paddy Power this year. There isn't the depth to it, I don't think, that we've sometimes had. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't sit here and say that I think 11-4 is a good bet, but I think he's going to take the world to beat him because he just looks to have everything pretty much in his favour.
See, what's your view on the big race?
For me?
UGC, yeah.
It is. The one thing I would say about Ginny's Destiny, I think this time last year, when he'd only been with Nicholls for a short while, he had that built-in edge because, as you all know, you wouldn't believe how fat he was when he arrived at Nicholls. Now, this time around, that edge isn't there, but joking apart, David's bang right with all those things. I do think, is it Garlaw? It's Garlaw, we pronounce it. I think he's going to be hard to keep out of the frame because he's fresh from a really good run at Chepstow and he's got solid form in those big-time handicap chases. But the one thing I really like the look of, I agree with David spot on. I don't think it has the depth of improvers you normally look for in a race like this. If he runs, I think it's brilliant that Dan Skelton's taking a swing off a mark of 167 with Protectorat, because it always adds a real layer of excitement to a big handicap when you've got a proper Grade 1 horse in there. And given his record in the second half of last season, even off that handicap mark, I wouldn't dream of laying him at 14-16-1, which is what he's trading at. And there should be one at the weights to beat him, maybe 2, but he's a good, high-quality horse who goes really well at Cheltenham, and he should not be 14-16-1, that fella.
Billy, you know I'm Team Ireland through the winter months, firmly behind the lads. I thought Henry de Bromhead's horse could run well in the Paddy Power Gold Cup. Didn't stay Galway last time, and unexposed in this sort of contest. Are you going to put me off?
Well, I did read your excellent horse-by-horse preview there, David Ord, where you tipped Let's Go Champ.
So disaster, absolute disaster.
I wouldn't put you off. I fancied the horse for the Galway Plate, and for 90% of the Galway Plate, I was very happy with how things were going. He looked to have every chance going into the dip and just didn't quite get up the hill for whatever reason. He has a bit of form over 3 miles, but 2.5 is probably his optimum trip. But look, he comes from a banging farmyard. Henry de Bromhead's horses are flying. You can I'm fairly certain this has been the plan for a long time. If Protectorat runs, he's only got 10-2 on his back, so he's got an absolute featherweight. I would assume Darragh O'Keefe will ride him, and he's riding out of his skin. So yeah, he goes there with a live chance. But look, he doesn't have the class of a Protectorat or a Ginny's Destiny, but weight stops a train. So off 10 stone 2, yeah, he should certainly run his race at the very least.
You had a 14-1 shot for us in the cross country. What have you got for us in the Paddy Power Gold Cup?
Well, I also read that excellent piece.
Yeah.
Audie, am I right saying the Irish don't win this race, do they? Full stop.
That's
But
true.
they don't tend to target it. That's why. Willie and Gordon, they never have runners, do they? Genuinely never have a runner.
I agree with what you said about Ginny's Destiny, and I completely agree with DJ, but I also agree with you about the price. And I think Protectorat might run here, GC. I don't think there's a whole heap of other options for him. I sense from the Skeltons that they'll have a crack here. And I'm sure John Pullen will have done a brilliant job with the ground. So I'm very hopeful Protectorat will run, and he could be a shortener. Likewise, Let's Go Champ, who I could see being very popular. And his jockey's making a big impression, Audie. And I sense that Henry de Bromhead really likes this guy as well. And sounds like Rachel might be out for a little while. But I'm seduced by this Harry Derham horse. I really am. Imagine. When you look at Derham's record with horses he picks up and when he runs them fresh, he's absolutely deadly. And they seem very, very confident about this, Imagine. They clearly think he's well handicapped. It's always been difficult to win this race fresh over the years, but Stage Star did it last year. And I do think this Harry Derham horse is a big, big runner.
Just to pick up on Harry Derham first time out, there's a really interesting runner that he's got in the Amateur Jockeys Handicap Chase. So I think it's the second race at Cheltenham on Saturday. It's Come On Teddy. He's coming off a bit of an absence, but used to be with Tom George. He's dropped a fair chunk in the weights from what he was doing as a novice. I think it's an amateur's race. He's already got Barry O'Neill jocked up. I'd be amazed if he doesn't go well and probably start favourite. He's one to sort of try and latch onto as soon as the betting opens, I think. That's Come On,
a 1
Teddy.
point win type job there, DJ.
I would think so, yeah, definitely.
I see a certain Patrick Mullins is jocked up on one in that race as well, and has been for a couple of days for Neil Mulholland Transmission, owned by Paul McKeown, who used to own Relegate, who won a champion bumper for Willie. So that'll be another interesting angle in that race, but I'm not going to put anyone off your selection there, DJ.
Just on Imagine, though, I'd obviously mentioned, if he was to win the Paddy Power Gold Cup, he'd be booking the trend of horses from that Caldwell Construction dispersal sale, wouldn't he? Things haven't quite gone as New Connection would have wanted so far with them.
Definitely not. Imagine was one of the cheaper purchases out of that sale at 320 grand. So yeah, it's like you said, it's been a bit of a disaster. Some of those top end horses. Obviously, we haven't seen Caldwell Potter yet, so hopefully we'll get to see him in the not too distant future. But Imagine is very interesting. He had some good form for Gordon last year. He finished his last run was not a particularly good one, but prior to that he looked very progressive. So if Harry Derham has him back on track, then a mark of 145 might not be beyond him,
BC, we're going to talk about the Great Wood Hurdle now, and it's Dysart Enos, who's a similar price favourite to Ginny's Destiny. Have they got similarly strong credentials?
I haven't gone to full depth in the Great Wood, but I suspect there are a good few dangers in the hurdle, not least Burdett Road. He's still intended, isn't he? And you have to think that the way he's like he raced over hurdles and the way he progressed on the flat, bolted up. I think it was a listed race at Newmarket, and then ran really well by Kyprios and company in the long distance cup. He must be pretty well handicapped horse in the low 130s, but likewise Dysart Enos, who was very, very short prices for most of her races. It's potential with her, but I'd be amazed if Fergal O'Brien and co didn't think that she was ahead of the BHA mark she's got at the moment.
DJ, if we're talking about trainers on the up, James Owen, who trains Burdett Road on the flat and over jumps, is beginning to make a real name for himself.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously Burdett Road shot onto the jumping scene, looking a real promising juvenile last year, didn't he? And obviously it looked rather disappointing when the wheels almost came off behind Sergino last time. But obviously we've seen what Sergino has gone on to do since then. And I think a mark of 133, it's got to be lenient, hasn't it? When you think the further improvement that Burdett Road has shown since he's gone back on the flat this summer. And yeah, this looks at a real good target for him, given the prize money and the level of opposition. I'd be amazed if he's not rated higher than 133 by the end of the jump season.
Didn't we have an Emmett Mullins phantom punt in this race last year? I can't remember what the horse was called, but he drifted like a barge on the day and ran accordingly. Billy Nash comes Jacobet Cavern off 568 days since his last jumps race, 36 since his last flat run. Do you know anything about this fella?
Well, he's actually got two in the race, GC. He's got Jacobet Cavern and he's got Tollstone, who was arguably more interesting. Jacobet Cavern was quite highly tried over hurdles for Paul Hennessy. Its last run over hurdles was behind Lossiemouth in the Grade 1 hurdle at the Punchstone Festival in 23. Ran in the Cez on the flat recently. Probably didn't quite get home. He's a quite keen going horse. Didn't stay in the Cez. So he goes there fit. Tollstone is a horse that's also been running on the flat and ran really well in a valuable handicap at Naas the other day. Finished second to Comfort Zone. So he's potentially well handicapped down at the foot of the weights. He's only got a mark of 121, which normally wouldn't be enough to get into a Grade Wood, but he's going to get in quite comfortably this year. I see he's got Adam Wedge jocked up on him. So yeah, both of them will be interesting. But again, typical Emmett Mullins, it'll be very much watch the market for clues and hope that they've landed on the right one this time.
Ed, you've been throwing the selections left, right and centre. What have you got for the Grey Wood?
No, to be honest with you, I think Dysart Enos, again, that's the price that you wouldn't like about her. She's a 3-1 chance. Burdett Road is an obvious one as well, and anything could happen with those Irish horses. I do think a horse that will run well is Under Control, the McManus horse for Henderson, who never quite hit the heights last year. They always thought an awful lot of this horse. Ran at Galway, Under Control, was quietly fancied that day as well. I think Under Control would probably be the interesting one at a double figure price, but not that confident about the Great Wood order.
It's word on the podcast to you, Billy. It's a big weekend in Navan, as GC said. We're cranking through the gears now for the jump season. Gordon Elliott in particular well represented across the 2 days, but Slade Steele potentially making his chasing debut as well. There's an awful lot to look forward to.
Loads to look forward to. Hopefully, as GC mentioned earlier on, we're going to get a bit of rain. There is some forecast for the weekend in Ireland, but hopefully we'll get enough to see what should be a plethora of really top horses, a lot of them from the Gordon Elliott yard at Navan this weekend. We might get to see the likes of Romeo Coolio again, who was so impressive the other day. You've got the Lismullen hurdle where Bob Ollinger, I believe, has been working quite well at Henry de Bromhead's. He'll be interesting if he goes there. You've the 4-3 also on Saturday with the likes of Banbridge. We've got a couple of really interesting beginners chases. Like you said, Slade Steele, we've possibility where last year's Supreme Novice winner will take on the Albert Bartlett winner in a beginner's chase on Sunday. You've got Slade's lined up to take part in that. You have the Tritown handicap chase as well on Sunday. Elliott responsible for 12 of the 25 there. I think they've been making very positive mentions about American Mike, who heads the weights. And he's also, I'm going to give you a 1-point win, RD, in the handicap hurdle on Sunday. Another Elliott horse called Safarur, who runs in the Tarla handicap hurdle on Sunday.
You just spell that for us, Billy.
Hang on. The old personal record book here.
S-A.
S-A, yeah.
F-U-R-E-U-R.
F-U-R, right, okay.
No, not necessarily that bit. Oh, no, that's a spelling, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
He was fourth in the Grand Annual last year, already. He was sent off favourite for the Grand Annual, finished fourth off a BHA rating of 145. I think probably 2 miles was a bit too short for him. Back over hurdles on Sunday, you can be sure he's fit and firing because the Elliott horses are flying, as we all know. Runs off a mark of 130. He's up to 2 miles and 6. He's 1 over 2.5 and 2.5 over hurdles. I think this trip will suit him a lot better. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Elliott decided to claim off him, which would further enhance his claims. But like I said, just looking down through the ratings or the entries for the weekend, he was one that really stood out to me.
So 1-point win, Safra, yeah?
1-point win.
Got it.
No, it's in the record book. That cannot be removed. We don't do that. There'll be no resetting.
You should tell listeners to spin through to 58 minutes on the podcast.
Yeah, well, they do that now. They put the timestamps on, which I find offensive because you find out where people zoom through till it's.
Do you?
Yeah. You see what segments are the most listened to, but excuse me. Time has beaten us. Thank you to GC, to Billy, to Ed, and to DJ. Best of luck yourselves with your Cheltenham bets and Navan bets this weekend. We'll be back next week to look ahead to Haydock, Betfair Chase Day. Always a fantastic day on the calendar. We can get going and weather updates from GC's back garden as well. That's worked well in the past. We'll be finding out.
Leafy.
That's the word that is worthy, but we'll have a full update next week. And before then, best of luck with your own weekend wagers.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion, and tips.